So today we get to work on Dave's favorite thing, recall training with a 4-year-old Red Lord Amazon named Finn. So the interesting thing about Kelly and Eric today is that they came to work on flight training, and they also described that they wanted to work on how to handle Finn when he gets upset. The cool thing was Dave was like, what does upset look like? Whenever you put a label on your bird, try to figure out how you would describe what it looks like to somebody else, because putting a label on it often leads us down the wrong path. But if you can really get descriptive of it and what it looks like, oftentimes that will lead you to the proper solution.
Okay, so now what do you think the cue is?
Just my hand.
It's just your hand. Having the verbal cue in the background can help kind of like push him into it,
Right.
but this is the cue. So now that you know that, you wouldn't tell the dog to sit 12 times in a row and then bridge and be like, good boy, right?
Right.
Same thing is happening. So if you want to have really clean handling,
Okay.
just be aware that your body language is your cue.
Okay.
And like as much as we want to say the verbal cue helps, it does in free flight, like it's a contact call, but I would argue, if I had to put a number on it, 98% of the cue is only your body language. So what I would do to set myself up for success is retrain the recall with that in mind. So I would set him down, and then I would give the visual cue at the exact same time I do the verbal cue, but only at the distance we know he's going to be successful.
Okay.
So in that situation, I said stand here because I knew we were going to have a really high likelihood for a flight there, where he was a little bit hesitant over there.
Yeah.
So we want to go to where it's working well, build up confidence, make that look really good, make him understand that that's the cue.
So today, Kelly and Eric wanted to work on flight training, but actually their flight training looked fantastic. And it was the before and after the formal part of the training session that needed work. And I think a lot of people forget about this. Taking your bird out of the cage, bringing it into the room that you're going to train in, or putting it on the T-stand, and then having your bird step up at the end and put it back into the cage, or carrier in our case at master classes. That whole thing is a training session. Every interaction is a training session. Remember that. So getting your bird out, what does that look like? Are you going to give a treat to your bird for coming out nicely, or are you going to skip it? Do you want to see it again? You reward it. So I think that was the biggest thing with Kelly and Eric today, is they kind of forgot that the whole thing was part of the session. And so Finn ended up on Eric's head a few times. Kelly ended up stepping him up really nicely from the head, but then wasn't rewarding. And so they were getting more of that because Finn wasn't getting rewarded for coming down. He was just getting natural reinforcement for being up there, which of course made Eric really uncomfortable and led to some great conversations about what their home life habits are.
It's not that I don't want to touch him, it's that my comfort level with him has slowly evolved.
In which direction?
Yeah, right? I would say when we first got him, I was afraid of him.
Okay.
He was young. I mean, he had just been born.
And we were figuring it out too.
And we were just learning. So, hi.
And I think a lot of us get in the habit of wanting to have our bird out all the time so that we don't feel guilty it's in its cage. Now, this leads to a lot of accidental reinforcement. And what had been explained to me in this class was, well, what do I do when he flies to my head when I'm bent over doing this in the kitchen? And I just want a snack. And then I give him a little bit of the snack because, you know, he flew to me but didn't bite me, so I gave him a piece of my snack, and it's just a whole thing. That's all accidental reinforcement. You're just gonna get more of those behaviors because the bird's out so much of the time and not actually intentionally set up for success. So think about the habits that you have with your bird and how often you're letting them out and when. Because if you're having dinner while your bird is out and your bird keeps flying to your plate, he's getting reinforced, even if accidentally. And their crops are teeny tiny. So those of you being like, I just give him a little piece, I'm not happy about it. It sabotages the seasonal feeding system and the pellets they should be eating as their main diet, which sets you up for long-term success. Our human foods do not need to be part of their daily diet. So we talk about this solution probably not enough, but a lot of people struggle with having a formal session. It looks really great. Then they go to step their bird up because the session's over. The bird senses the session is over because it's been a habit or a pattern, and they're like, nope. I don't want to stop getting treats. I want to stay here in the training session. So then we end up using not permission-based training, and all of that training that just happened that was so beautiful ends up going to heck. So what I would recommend here, and a fish just, oh, look at it. Did you see that? Oh, look. Holy crap. Did you see that?
Yeah, I thought somebody was throwing things.
Throwing that fish, man. That was nuts. So think about the end of the session as still being part of the session. Don't fall into predictable patterns that your bird can anticipate when it doesn't want the training to be over. Incorporate it as part of the training. So if your bird's more likely to fly to you because you're doing a recall session, don't necessarily end on a step up, end on a flight, and then maybe cue your bird to target or fly back to its cage and go into the cage for some treats or whatever you need to do to just kind of mix it up. But make sure it's not always the same and it's not always predictable. And keep in mind, if your bird doesn't want to step up, maybe ask for a recall instead. There's no harm in that, but just make sure that you're looking at every interaction as a training session.